Trump has been temporarily knocked off the ballot in Colorado
Right.
because they deem him to be an insurrectionist. Now, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Uh, it's due to the 14th Amendment, Section 3. I cover this a lot on the grift, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, those are Reconstruction Amendments. Those are really
Okay.
important to black history, right?
Yeah.
And Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says, paraphrasing here, neither president nor vice president, can hold office if you participated in insurrection, treasonous, whatever the case may be. It was held for former Confederates. Now, one thing that I was
The
saying
ones who have
yesterday,
monuments now.
exactly what I was saying yesterday, here's how crazy it is, y'all. Section 3 was basically written for former Confederates, but but the folks who wrote this amendment kept it broad. So they were kind of smart with that. They kept it broad. Those former Confederates did not go to trial. They were not indicted or anything like that, but they were still seen as insurrectionists who rose up against the government. For folks that don't know, this Civil War, you had this thing called the Confederate States of America. They separated from the rest of the country and rose up against the Union. Bloodshed, horror, whatever the case may be. Lincoln's dumbass didn't want to allow black folks to fight because he didn't want to make the war about slavery. And then when he saw the North was losing the war, he let black folks fight. And that's the main reason why we win this whole thing called the Civil War. But what's really sad about this is even before this amendment is written, that Abraham Lincoln, before he's assassinated, he was already working on pardons and giving amnesty to former Confederates because he wanted
Mm.
them back in the Union, right? So
Mm.
he was already doing that. Then the demon, horrific, trash box president Andrew Johnson, who is Lincoln's VP after he is assassinated because Hannibal Hamlin was dropped his first VP. He begins giving all these pardons to former Confederates. So I'm saying all this to say, in 1868, when this amendment is written, it was barely utilized. It was barely enforced. Then
Mm.
Congress passed general amnesty to all these former Confederates. What happened? White supremacy, white supremacists were reinstalled all throughout the South.
Mm.
All throughout the South. Why? Because they didn't enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. They didn't enforce it. They had I see all these pundits talking about it, and everybody's leaving out how these former Confederates were not held accountable. John Marshall Stone becomes governor of Mississippi.
Mm.
Look up all these folks, the horror that they enacted. And folks like Thaddeus Stevens, before he passed away, he warned, we are going to give the South back to these treasonous. We're going to give the South. Charles S. Thomas, who becomes senator of Colorado. Interesting,
Mm.
we have Colorado, and he was a slave owner. He made horrible comments that he was against the death penalty, but he supported lynchings. Wade Hampton III, United States Senator of South Carolina, he was a Confederate. So I'm saying all this is why it's so important to look back at our history.
Yeah.
If we don't enforce Section 3 of this 14th Amendment, and we allow, I shouldn't say we because we don't have the power, and this man gets right in as president, these were folks who were becoming governor and senator.
Yeah.
We're repeating history. That's the reason why Reconstruction was gutted,
Yeah.
is because we gave the South back to treasonous, to
Mm-hmm.
insurrectionists.
Mm.
That's the beginning of the end. That's why I'm not a big fan of Lincoln. Lincoln was already before he died. How can we forgive? Let him come back
Yeah.
in. Let him come back in.
Bygones.
Now, my man Thaddeus Stevens, my man, Pennsylvania rep, good dude. He was in Congress. He said they shouldn't even be allowed to vote. He even
Mm.
said that the South shouldn't even rejoin the Union. He said make them military territories. And and
Okay.
and they folks are like, bro, you going too far. He said, no, I'm not going too far. He was right.
Yeah.
We gave the South back to treasonous, and there are people in this country who want to give the country back to a man
Mm.
who, allegedly, reportedly, incited an insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
So shout out to Colorado for getting it right, but I want us to remember all throughout the South how they got it wrong in the 1860s, in the 1870s. It is so parallel to today. We're talking about the 14th Amendment, Section 3 today. They were having this conversation in the 1860s.
Yeah.
And they did not make the right decision. And I've covered this before. You had black folks all throughout the South sobbing, saying, how dare you give this country, this land back to the very people who had us in bondage.
Mm-mm-mm.
And what happens? These demon governors, these demon senators, they put in black codes. They find that black folks, they put them in these exploitive contracts. They exploit them financially. They attack their institutions. There's riots and riot. It was so clear. We can't make the same mistake again. But you know, that's Americana. We like making the same mistakes again. We like uplifting Confederates. The Confederacy was only in operation from 1861 to 1865, Reese. Why are we celebrating a party that was only functioning for 4 years?
Right.
Celebrate the Whigs if you want. If you want to go to, I mean, not that I like that party, but if you want to celebrate some more, why a party that only existed for 4 years? For 4 years. This isn't even complicated Constitution language. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who have previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion. Is that complicated? I know it gets complicated. Is it? I don't feel complicated.
That's 2 plus 2 equals 4.
They wrote that real plain.
Yes, very much so. Very.
They said, we're going to make this clear.
Yes.
But what are your thoughts on this, Reese?
Well, I think it's a short-term victory because, like you said, I mean, Trump put 3 people on the Supreme Court. So that's 3 votes for Trump. Hello. This is very clear cut. What I found interesting, and I'm not trying to single anybody out in particular, but the so-called I have mixed feelings about this crowd. You notice how Democrats always have mixed feelings about shit that to me is really unequivocally positive, but they always feel like, well, what if it happens to us? Well, why don't you cross that bridge when you get there? See, Republicans celebrate point blank in the period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. No, I don't know how much. Normally, I wouldn't. No, they go all the fuck in. I mean, I saw Dr. Cornel West. Like, I guess he's still a presidential candidate. He said, well, I know that Trump is X, Y, Z, but we have to be careful about celebrating this. So, that's what I find a little bit interesting is the people who fall.
Wait, what did Dr. Cornel West? He
Let me pull up the tweet, okay? Because he was, kind of like saying like this ain't necessarily a good thing.
Cornel West issues a warning about Colorado's Donald Trump ruling.
Yep.
Wow.
So that's what
we must be very careful in celebrating the decision of the Colorado Supreme Court. It's true that Brother Trump is a bona fide gangster and neo-fascist who must be held accountable. At the same time, we don't want the courts deciding the outcome of elections. The power must reside with and for the people. But what about the 14th Amendment? Dr. West, do you know that was the same language that people used to forgive former Confederates? That was the same argument, Dr. West. Come on now. They were saying the same thing. That's why they were granting all this amnesty and doing all these pardons. Dr. West has got the 14th Amendment is rooted right in black history. That's exactly what they were saying. Why would you say something? That doesn't even make any sense. If you commit treason, if you are insurrectionist, you cannot hold office. And this is what Chris Christie and Nikki Haley is saying.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting. And then he threw Biden talking about, the Democrats should not rely on the courts as a mechanism to circumvent Biden's
And may,
poll
may I
numbers.
ask, Reese? They relied on the courts when they made sure there wasn't that they made sure that George Bush became president when there were only
Okay,
500 votes
right.
separating Bush and Gore in Florida.
Yeah.
They went
Stop the
right to the
count.
courts, stopped the count. And what did Al Gore do? When Al Gore conceded. The
Mhm.
courts are used. They
The
have
courts
been
are
used.
literally an instrumental part of free and fair elections. Okay. That's literally what the courts are there for. So if the courts are actually working to protect democracy, I'll put that in air quotes, shit, democracy. That's them doing their fucking job, right? I mean, if the Constitution said you cannot be president if you owe back child support, your ass wouldn't be on the ballot, right? Okay. It wouldn't be about poll numbers. It wouldn't be about nothing else. It would be like, well, the Constitution says this is eligibility. And based on this eligibility, you are disqualified. Your ass not on the ballot. That's not, that's just the rules. Them's the rules, right? You know what I'm saying? So all I'm saying is that this is a matter of eligibility, which courts are typically involved in. Okay. Now, I don't think that's unfair. I don't think it has nothing to do with nobody's polling numbers. This is a primary issue at this
Wait, Reese,
point.
I
So
think that was some classic Colbert shade. I don't know if that. Say that one more time. Say it again. What would you say? That
I
was.
say if the
I,
I said if the
for who?
Constitution said you cannot owe back child support, your
Who?
ass would be on the ballot, and that would just be the rule.
Who would that be addressed? Who you're?
Well, who does the shoe fit? Who does the shoe fit? I ain't gonna say it because then I'm gonna get the little people calling in being mad. Okay. But I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, if it's about
Mm,
taxes being back due, child support being back due, them's will be the rules. You know what I'm saying? This case,
mm.
the rule says that you cannot have motherfucking insurrection. I don't think that's an unreasonable rule. Okay. It's certain rules for president. You got to be born in the motherfucking United States. You got to be 35 plus. And it might be a handful of other ones. And one of the rules is you can't have an insurrection. Not a lot of criteria. Okay. Luckily, child support is not in the Constitution. It's not in the amendments either. So you
Mm.
safe. But in this case, Trump, he ain't so safe. Until it gets to the Supreme Court, then he'll be back in the game.